The wind came without warning that night. It swept through the neighborhood like something angry, something that had been waiting all day for the right moment to strike. The kind of cold that doesn't just touch your skin, it goes deeper. It reaches into your bones, into your chest, into the part of you that still believes the world is safe. And on the front steps of a house that should have been warm, should have been full of light and laughter and the smell of dinner on the stove, two people sat huddled together in the freezing dark. One of them was old. Her hands were rough from a lifetime of hard work. Her thin wrapper, the kind she wore on ordinary days around the house, offered her almost nothing against the bitter night air. She sat with her back straight, the way proud women do even when they are suffering, even when their lips are trembling, even when their hands are shaking so badly they can barely hold the child beside them. The child, a little girl, no older than 5. Her tiny fingers curled into the old woman's side, searching for any warmth she could find. Her lips had gone pale. Her little feet had stopped moving. She wasn't crying anymore. She had passed the point of crying. She just sat there, barely blinking, staring at the front door of the house like she was waiting for someone to remember she existed. They had been out there for hours, and the door behind them was locked. Not by a stranger, not by an enemy, not by someone who didn't know them, by someone who had looked them in the face, who had chosen, deliberately and quietly, to turn a key and walk away. Then headlights, slow, cutting through the darkness of the driveway like two eyes opening in the night. Car pulled in. He wasn't supposed to be home. Not that night. Not for 2 more days. But there he was. And when he stepped out of that car and his eyes adjusted to the dark, and he saw them, his mother, his daughter, sitting on that cold concrete like forgotten things left out in the rain, something inside him broke. Not loudly, not with a scream or a crash. It broke the way trust breaks. Quietly, completely, and forever. Hello friends, welcome to our story. If you are new here, we are so glad you found us today. Please subscribe, hit the like button, and tap that notification bell so you never miss a story like this one. And drop a comment right now. Tell us where you are watching from. Are you in Atlanta, Houston, Chicago, maybe Toronto or London, Lagos or Accra? We read every single one. Now settle in because this story is going to stay with you long after it ends. His name was Daniel Okoye, 38 years old, broad-shouldered, the kind of man who measured his words before he spoke them, who came early to meetings and stayed late at work, who sent money home before he paid his own bills, who never asked for praise because, in his mind, doing right wasn't something you celebrated, it was simply what you did. To anyone looking from the outside, Daniel had built the kind of life most people only dream about. A 3-bedroom house in a quiet, tree-lined neighborhood outside of Atlanta. A senior logistics manager position at a firm he had climbed into over 11 years of patience and discipline. A little girl named Lily, his heartbeat, his reason, the one person who could make him laugh without trying. And a wife named Vanessa, beautiful, composed, the kind of woman who always said the right thing at the right time. They had been married for 6 years. 6 years of birthday dinners, of weekend road trips, of arguments that ended in apologies, of a life that looked, from every angle anyone cared to look, like a good one. But before any of that, before Vanessa, before the house, before the career, there was Mama Grace. If you've been watching this channel, you already know. Some stories don't begin with the drama. They begin with the foundation. And to understand what happened that night, you need to understand where Daniel came from. Mama Grace raised Daniel alone. His father left when Daniel was 4. No note, no forwarding address, just absence, the kind that teaches a child very early that love is not always permanent, and that the people who stay are the ones who matter. Mama Grace stayed. She sold fried plantain and beans by the roadside outside their small apartment in Decatur. Up at 4 in the morning. Home after dark. Her hands always smelling of palm oil and smoke. Her feet always tired. But her eyes were always steady. Always warm. Always saying, without words, I see you. I'm here. You are not alone. Daniel would sometimes sit with her at the roadside stall after school, doing his homework on a small wooden stool while she served customers. He never complained. He never felt embarrassed. Because to him, that stall wasn't a symbol of lack. It was a symbol of everything his mother was willing to do so that he could be more. He made her a promise when he was 14. He doesn't remember the exact day, but he remembers the moment. He remembers the smell of rain on hot pavement, and the way her face looked in the yellow streetlight. He had grabbed her hand and said, "Mama, I'm going to take care of you. One day. I promise." She had smiled at him, the way only mothers smile when they believe in you more than you believe in yourself. And Daniel Okoye had spent the next 24 years keeping that promise. He bought her a plane ticket to Atlanta when he got his first real promotion, set up a room for her in the house, took her to church on Sundays, called her every single morning when she wasn't there, made sure she had everything, her medications, her favorite tea, her television shows, her comfort. Because to Daniel, Mama Grace wasn't just his mother. She was the reason he was standing. When he brought Vanessa home the first time, Mama Grace had said very little. She had made dinner. She had smiled. She had answered questions politely. But afterward, only once very quietly, she had said to Daniel, "Be careful, my son. A woman who smiles too quickly in front of others sometimes has a different face when no one is watching." Daniel had laughed it off. "Mama, you just need to get to know her." Mama Grace had nodded slowly and said nothing more. The early years of the marriage were fine. Vanessa was attentive. She called Mama Grace Mom in front of people. She helped with the cooking sometimes. She sat with her and watched her shows. She seemed genuinely like she was trying. But somewhere around year 2, something shifted. It was so gradual that Daniel didn't notice it at first. The way cold settles into a room before you realize someone left the window open. It started with small things. A sigh when Mama Grace spoke too long at the dinner table. A rolled eye when her name came up in conversation. A sudden need to visit a friend every time Mama Grace came to stay for a few weeks. Then came the passive comments. "She doesn't have to fold laundry that way. I wish she wouldn't rearrange things in my kitchen. Daniel, I need you to talk to her." Daniel would listen. He would nod. He would try to mediate, to explain to his mother that Vanessa had her own way of doing things, that the house had its rhythms, that they needed to be patient with each other. He thought he was being a good husband. He didn't realize he was slowly, steadily choosing silence over truth. And silence, left long enough, becomes permission. By year 4, Mama Grace had quietly stopped offering her opinions at the dinner table. She had stopped rearranging things in the kitchen. She had started spending more time in her room when Vanessa was home, coming out less, speaking less, shrinking herself into the corners of a house that should have felt like home. Daniel noticed she seemed quieter. He told himself she was getting older. He told himself she was just tired. He didn't ask the questions he should have asked. And Lily, sweet, 5-year-old Lily, knew nothing of any of it. She only knew that Grandma Grace smelled like shea butter and told the best stories before bedtime. She only knew that Grandma always had a piece of candy somewhere in her wrapper pocket. She only knew that being near Grandma felt like being held even when she wasn't being touched. Lily loved Mama Grace the way children love. Fully, simply, without condition. And Mama Grace loved her back the same way. That love, at least, was something Vanessa couldn't touch. Or so Daniel believed. If this story is already sitting heavy on your chest, Type, "I feel this" in the comments. And if you haven't subscribed yet, please do, because this channel is built for people who believe stories matter. People who believe that truth told honestly can change how we see the world. Now, let's go back to that night. The business trip had been to Chicago. 2 days. A vendor meeting, a site review, a dinner with a partner company's executives. Standard. Routine. Daniel had packed light, kissed Lily on the forehead while she slept, told Vanessa he'd call when he landed. He landed. He called. She answered on the second ring, warm voice, easy conversation. Nothing unusual. But on the morning of the second day, the vendor meeting collapsed. A miscommunication on both sides, the kind of corporate mess that wastes everyone's time. The rest of the agenda was postponed. By noon, Daniel was back at his hotel, rescheduling flights, texting his assistant, and calculating that if he caught the 4 o'clock, he'd be home before 9. He thought about calling Vanessa to let her know. He decided he'd surprise them instead. He imagined Lily's face when she saw him come through the door early. He imagined Mama Grace fussing over him and telling him he looked thin, the way she always did regardless of how he looked. He imagined the house warm, dinner maybe still on the stove, the television on in the background. He smiled to himself the whole flight home. He had no idea what was waiting for him. He pulled into the driveway at 8:47 p.m. The house lights were on inside. He could see the glow through the curtains. Music faintly, something playing from a speaker somewhere in the living room. He grabbed his bag from the back seat, stretched his neck, took a breath of the cold night air. And then he saw them. He almost didn't. The porch light was off, and that alone should have been the first sign because Mama Grace always complained about walking in the dark, and Vanessa knew that, and the porch light was never off when Mama Grace was home. But the light from the driveway caught them. Mama Grace, sitting on the concrete steps, her head slightly bowed, her wrapper pulled tight around her shoulders, her whole body shivering in a slow, steady rhythm that told him she had been there long enough to stop fighting the cold and simply endure it. And beside her, tucked under her arm, barely conscious, Lily. Her little face pressed against Mama Grace's side, her small chest rising and falling, her lips the color of ash. Daniel didn't remember dropping his bag. He didn't remember crossing the driveway. He was just suddenly there, kneeling on the frozen concrete, his hands on his daughter's face, his voice cracking on her name. Lily, Lily, baby. Hey, look at Daddy. Her eyes fluttered. Daddy, she whispered. The word barely made it out. He turned to his mother. Mama, Mama, how long have you been out here? Mama Grace lifted her head slowly. Her eyes were red. Not from crying, but from the cold, from the wind, from hours of trying to hold herself together for the sake of a child who didn't understand why the door wouldn't open. Since 6, she said. Her voice was steady. Even now it was steady, because that was who she was. Since 6. Nearly 3 hours. Daniel stood up. His hands were shaking. His jaw was tight. He looked at the front door, warm light leaking from underneath it, music drifting through the walls, and something happened in his chest that he had no word for. It wasn't anger, not yet. It wasn't grief. It was something that lived between the two. Something that felt like the floor dropping out from under everything he had built. What happened? He asked, quietly. Why are you out here? Mama Grace was quiet for a moment. Then she said, Your wife locked the door. 3 words that changed everything. Your wife locked the door. He banged on that door until his knuckles hurt. Once, the music kept playing. Twice, nothing. 3 times, hard, open-palmed. The kind of knock that says, I know you hear me. A pause. Then the handle turned. Vanessa opened the door. She was dressed nicely. her hair done, a glass of wine in one hand, the kind she poured on evenings she called unwinding. She looked at Daniel with an expression that took him several seconds to identify. It wasn't surprise. It wasn't relief. It wasn't guilt. It was irritation, like he had interrupted something. "Why are you back?" she asked. "Not are they okay. Not I can explain. Not Daniel, I'm so sorry. Just, why are you back?" Daniel stared at her. He could feel his daughter's cold body against his arm. He could hear his mother climbing slowly to her feet behind him, her joints stiff, her breath unsteady. "Why were they outside, Vanessa?" She took a slow sip of her wine. "They needed to learn boundaries," she said. "Your mother keeps." "My mother," Daniel said, very quietly, the quiet that comes before something very large. "And my child." Vanessa's chin lifted slightly. "And this is my house too, Daniel." He stepped inside. She stepped back. He didn't look at her face anymore. His eyes moved through the room. The living room was warm, the kind of warm that felt like a deliberate cruelty when he thought of the cold outside. 2 glasses on the coffee table. Not 1, 2. A half-empty bottle of red wine. A throw blanket pulled from the back of the couch and piled on the sofa like someone had been sitting there recently. Comfortable, easy, settled in. And then, draped over the back of the dining chair, like it belonged there, like it had been placed there 100 times before, a man's jacket. Not his size, not his style, not his. Daniel stood very still. He heard footsteps from the hallway, the bathroom door opening. And then, a man walked out. For a moment, just one moment, Daniel thought he was wrong, thought he had misread the jacket, misread the glasses, misread the entire evening. Because the mind, when it is about to be broken, will fight for one last second of normal. Will tell you, wait, there's an explanation, wait, you're jumping to conclusions, wait. But there was no explanation for this. Because Daniel knew this man. His name was Marcus Webb. They had worked together for 4 years. Sat across from each other in quarterly reviews. Had lunch together 3 times a week for 2 years straight. Daniel had been the one who recommended Marcus for a team lead position 18 months ago. Had put his own name behind Marcus's. Marcus had come to Lily's 4th birthday party. He had sat at Daniel's dining table and eaten the food Mama Grace had cooked. He had called Daniel brother. Marcus froze when he saw Daniel standing there. The color drained from his face. And in that frozen, terrible silence, everything became clear. Every late night Vanessa said she was with her girlfriends. Every weekend she said she needed space. Every time Daniel had come home tired and she had seemed distant, somewhere else, somewhere he couldn't reach, she had been somewhere. She had been with someone. And while Daniel was working, grinding, sacrificing, building, providing, his home had been used for something he could never have imagined. His trust had been used as a door. His absence had been used as an invitation. And his mother and his child had been locked outside so that this could happen without interruption. Daniel looked at Marcus for a long time. Then he turned to Vanessa. She met his eyes without looking away. And she said, quietly, almost gently, like it was the most reasonable thing in the world, "You were never here anyway. Go ahead and pause for just a second. I want to ask you something. If you were Daniel, standing in that room, looking at that scene, what would you have done? What would you have said? Could you have stayed calm? Could you have walked away without breaking something? Type your answer in the comments, because I genuinely want to know what you think. And while you're there, if this story is hitting different for you tonight, hit that like button. Takes 1 second, and it tells us to keep telling stories like this one. Daniel said nothing for a very long time. People sometimes imagine that in moments like that, you scream, you throw things, You become something loud and unrecognizable. But that's not what happens to a man like Daniel. A man who learned stillness from a mother who endured. A man who had been carrying weight quietly his whole life. He just went somewhere inside himself. Somewhere deep. And when he came back, it was like watching someone become decided. He turned around. He walked to the hall closet and pulled out Lily's coat, her boots, her small backpack. He walked to his mother's room, the room Mama Grace had been using on this visit, and he packed her bag. Quietly, methodically, her medications in the front pocket, her Bible on top, her good church shoes wrapped in a plastic bag at the bottom the way she always packed them. Marcus had already left. Daniel didn't know when. He never heard footsteps, never heard the door. Marcus simply disappeared, the way cowards do when consequence arrives. Vanessa stood in the living room watching Daniel move through the house. She said his name once. He didn't respond. She said it again, differently, softer, with something that might have been the beginning of regret, or might have simply been the realization that she had miscalculated. He still didn't respond. He came back to the front door. Mama Grace was standing, her bag over his shoulder now, Lily bundled in her coat and held against his chest, her eyes finally closing with the warmth of him. Mama Grace looked at her son's face, and she reached up, slowly with those rough, tired, beautiful hands, and she touched his cheek. Just once. She didn't say anything. She didn't need to. He covered her hand with his. Then he said softly, to no one in particular and everyone at once, "Let's go home. Not back inside. Not upstairs. Away." They drove to a hotel that night. Daniel got a room with 2 beds. He tucked Lily in, pulled the blanket up to her chin, and sat on the edge of the mattress for a long time listening to her breathe. That small, steady, innocent sound that reminded him exactly what mattered and exactly what didn't. Mama Grace sat in the chair by the window, her Bible open in her lap, not reading, just holding it, the way she always held it when she needed steadying. After a while she said, "I didn't want to tell you." Daniel looked at her. "I knew you loved her," she said, "and I knew that if I said anything, you would think I was a difficult old woman. So I stayed quiet. I kept the peace. I thought maybe things would get better." She paused. "I should have told you sooner. I'm sorry, my son." Daniel shook his head slowly. "No, Mama. You don't apologize to me tonight." She closed her Bible. "Are you okay?" He thought about it for a real moment. Not the polite moment where you say yes because that's the expected answer, but a real moment where you actually check. "No," he said, "but I will be." She nodded. "Yes," she said, "you will." And somehow, from her, it sounded like a fact. The weeks that followed were not easy. Let's not pretend they were. Divorce is never clean. It doesn't happen in a single dramatic moment and then disappear. It bleeds into everything. Into mornings when you wake up and reach for a life that isn't there anymore. Into evenings when your daughter asks questions that you don't quite know how to answer. Into the moments when you're in a meeting at work and your mind goes somewhere else. Back to that driveway, those headlights, that concrete, those 2 faces in the cold, and you have to breathe through it until you can function again. Daniel filed for divorce 3 weeks after that night. He didn't do it in anger. He had given himself 3 weeks, not to reconsider, but to make sure he was acting from clarity, not from pain. There's a difference. Pain makes you reactive. Clarity makes you decisive. He wanted to be decisive. His attorney was efficient. The process moved forward. What happened with Vanessa and with Marcus didn't need Daniel's help to unravel. The truth, once it starts moving, doesn't need to be pushed. People who were there at both their weddings, who had eaten at both their tables, who had called them both friends, they found out. Quietly, then less quietly. Conversations happened. Looks were exchanged in hallways. Marcus resigned from the firm before he was asked to. Vanessa moved out of the house and in with a sister in another city. Daniel never told anyone what he had seen that night beyond what was necessary for legal proceedings. He didn't need to spread it. He didn't build his peace on someone else's destruction. Because that restraint, that dignity was Mama Grace's son showing. Custody of Lily was settled with shared arrangements, though Lily spent most of her time with Daniel and Mama Grace. She was young enough that she didn't understand the full weight of what had happened. But children feel things their words can't carry yet. She was quieter for a while. She stopped asking for Vanessa as often as you might expect, which, in its own way, said something. But slowly, she came back to herself, because she had Daddy, and she had Grandma Grace, and that, for a 5-year-old, is a world. 9 months after that night, Daniel sat on the back porch of a smaller house he'd rented while things settled. A modest place, nothing like what he'd built, but warm in the ways that actually counted. Lily was inside with Mama Grace, the two of them laughing about something, their voices carrying through the screen door in overlapping waves of sound that he had grown to love more than any expensive silence. He was holding a cup of coffee. The night was cool, but not cold. He thought about the version of himself who had pulled into that driveway 9 months ago. The man who had a perfect-looking life and had been so busy maintaining its appearance that he had stopped looking at what was underneath. The man who had noticed his mother shrinking and told himself she was just tired. The man who had worked and worked and worked and had somehow missed the thing that needed him most. He didn't blame himself for the betrayal. That was Vanessa's choice and Marcus's choice, and neither of those choices belonged to him. But he owned the willful blindness, the years of choosing peace over truth, of smoothing over the small signs because confronting them would have been uncomfortable. He owned that, not with self-destruction, not with endless regret, but with honesty, and with the quiet, firm intention to never again mistake a quiet house for a happy one. The door opened behind him. Lily padded out in her socks, the ones with the small bears on the ankles that she refused to let anyone wash because she said washing made them sad, and she climbed into his lap without asking, the way children do when they know they are always welcome. She pressed her back against his chest and looked up at the sky. "Daddy," she said. "Yeah, baby?" "Grandma says stars are just God's night lights." Daniel looked up. "Yeah, I think that's true," she said very seriously, "because they're always on." He wrapped both arms around her. He didn't say anything. He just held her. And the night was quiet, and the stars were on. And somewhere inside him, in the place that had been broken and was now slowly becoming something else, he felt the first real breath of something that wasn't just survival. Felt like beginning again. Mama Grace, for her part, never said "I told you so." Not once. Not a hint of it. She simply, from the night of the hotel onward, showed up every single morning with something warm to eat and something steady in her eyes. She looked after Lily with the same fierce, quiet love she had given Daniel 30-something years ago when the world was harder and the nights were colder and there was no one else. She was still that woman. After everything, still that woman. And Daniel looked at her one morning. She was standing at the stove, her back to him, humming something old and low and familiar, and he thought, this is what strength actually looks like. Not the kind you show off. The kind that stays. He never had to put that into words. She already knew. Now let me ask you something before we close. Think about the people in your own life who have stayed, who have shown up, who have carried weight quietly, without applause, without acknowledgement, just because they loved you. When did you last tell them? And think about this, have you ever been so focused on building a life that you stopped seeing the people inside it? Daniel's story isn't just his. It belongs to every person who has ever worked so hard to provide that they forgot to be present. Every person who saw the signs and looked away because looking was uncomfortable. Every person who lost something they thought was permanent, and had to find out that what was actually permanent was standing in the cold on a concrete step, waiting for them to come home. Not the house, the people. If this story stayed with you tonight, if it made you feel something real, I want to hear from you. Tell me in the comments. Where are you watching from? What city, what country? Let me know you're out there. This channel is a community, and every comment reminds us why we do this. And tell me, what part of the story hit you the hardest? Was it Mama Grace on those steps? Was it the moment Daniel saw the jacket? Was it Lily whispering Daddy in the dark? Let us know, because your reaction tells us we're doing something worth doing. If you're new here, welcome. This channel tells stories that are real, raw, and human. Stories about loyalty, betrayal, resilience, and the kind of love that doesn't make headlines but holds entire lives together. If that's the kind of story you want in your life, subscribe. Turn on notifications, because we drop new stories regularly, and you do not want to miss what's coming next. And if the story moved you, share it. Send it to someone who needs to hear it tonight. Because sometimes the right story at the right moment is exactly what a person needed without knowing they needed it. Daniel Okoye lost a marriage. He lost a house he had built with his own hands. He lost a friendship he had believed in for years. He lost the version of his life he had been so sure was real. But here is what he kept. He kept his mother, the woman who sold food by the roadside so he could have a future, who sat on cold concrete for 3 hours because she would not leave a child alone, who showed him, his whole life, what it means to endure with grace. He kept his daughter, his heartbeat, his reason, the little girl with bare socks who believed stars were God's night lights. He kept his dignity. And he kept something even harder to explain, a kind of clarity that only comes after the worst has happened and you've survived it. The kind of clarity that lets you look at your life without flinching. That lets you choose going forward more carefully, more honestly, with both eyes open. Some people call that wisdom. Mama Grace would call it a blessing. The kind that comes wrapped in pain, that you don't recognize until later, when you're sitting on a back porch in the cool night air, with your daughter in your lap and your mother humming at the stove, and you realize that everything you actually needed was already there, had always been there, waiting for you to stop looking in the wrong direction. Thank you for watching. Like this video, share it, subscribe, and in the comments, tell me where you're watching from, because every single one of you matters to this channel. See you in the next story.